Thank you all. You may be seated. And so I am sorry about that, Roy. I have a really bad habit of when it's my responsibility to click through the slides, I'm used to being up front singing and having somebody else click through the slides. And so when it's my responsibility, sometimes I forget that it's my responsibility. Josephine Ruth Cline. She was born May 7th, 1939, in Silver Spring Township to William and Mary McNair. William and Mary owned a few different farms raising the kids, but basically, Joe was raised on the farm. She grew up working hard. This is a trait that would define her entire life. She and her sister, they would work in the barn with the boys. While in school, they would have to get up early, bring in the cows, clean them, milk them, go to school, and then when they came from school, do it all over again. And Joe, she was done with school by the 10th grade to stay home and work on the farm. They did work hard, but they were kids. They had their fun as well. The neighboring farm had kids the same age, and they would play together, and they had this secret code where whoever was done with their chores first would hang a tea towel on the line. And then when the other farm's kids were done, if they looked and they saw the tea towel, they knew that chores were done and they could get together and go play until they had to get back together and do their chores again. One day, after being out playing, they were walking their bikes home with a train approaching, and Joe was absolutely convinced that she could beat the train, and she almost didn't. She grew up poor. Records were found showing that in 1940, if I caught this right, her dad made $350. That's less than $1 a day. They would go roller skating. She was a big roller skater. But the girls, her sisters, they only had a single pair of skates to share. And so one would go out and do a couple laps and then come back and give the skates to their sister. And she would go out and do a couple laps and then come back and so on and so forth. But you learn to appreciate the little things. They would go and pick wild strawberries, bring them home, and her mom would make strawberry shortcake. The family car wasn't big enough to fit the entire family. So when mom went grocery shopping, it was a treat to get to go along with mom grocery shopping. And when she was little, one year when she was still attending the one-room schoolhouse, her teacher got her a baby doll for Christmas, and that was a gift. Those are things that may seem simple to us today, but for Joe, those things were rarities, and they were treats for her. Joe was an excellent roller skater. Something she did a lot growing up, something she did a lot with her girls, took them roller skating every Sunday. But there was one fateful trip to the skating rink where she met a man by the name of Cline. She had caught his eye, and he had a really hard time getting her off the farm so that he could spend time with her. To the point that so I am used, like when I was growing up and I was dating, I was used to curfews, like 9, 10, 11 o'clock. Joe's curfew was 4 in the afternoon. If Kurt wanted to spend time with her, he had to have her home in time so that she could do her barn work before the day was over. Right? And I did some math on that. Like by the time Joe and Kurt were dating, she was legally an adult. Like she was over the age of 18 and had a curfew of 4 p.m. Right? Like that's what life was growing up. But they persevered. And November 1961 they got married. They originally planned a honeymoon to New York, but as the weather stirred up, forced them south instead. Down to D.C. and a few different things along the way. But on the way home, Joe, being a big Elvis fan, she made Kurt stop at the theater so she could see the newest Elvis movie, which, if I did my research right, it was Blue Hawaii. They first lived near where Kurt grew up. This is where they started their family, but they weren't there too long before buying their place on Coon Road, which is where many of us knew Joe and Kurt to be. Of their kids, Diane was first, with Deb being the middle child, and followed by Lisa, the youngest. They kept their kids busy. I already mentioned roller skating every Sunday. Every Saturday night they were at Silver Spring Racetrack. And yes, Joe was a very willing and enthusiastic participant in the races. Some of this was due to the fact that her brothers, I have Bill and Steve, but her brothers Bill and Steve were racing, with Steve being the one who raced at Silver Spring, and a few of the pictures were up in the slideshow. Which, by the way, if you didn't get a chance to catch the slideshow, I'll have it playing on a TV over there as we're eating lunch. Quick cute story about racing, though. Joe's mom, their mom, never got to see them race. And so one night, they took her to Silver Spring to watch the race, to get to see him race. And she watched the entire race like this. She couldn't bear to see what was going on with the pending disaster. For their lives growing up, there were Kurt's enduro races and out riding motorcycles where she was an excellent passenger on the back of the motorcycle, falling asleep on the back of the bike. They took day trips with the girls to Hershey Park in Lancaster County, coal mine tours, East Broadtop Railroad, the Smithsonian, picnics at state parks. They also had longer trips to Colonial Williamsburg, Busch Gardens, and Delaware Bay. And they also kept the girls busy at school. Made sure that the girls had absolutely everything that they needed to be successful in what it was they were doing. With Kurt working shift work, transportation of the girls back and forth to their different things largely fell on Joe, largely her responsibility. And in that, there was basketball and band and tennis. I have a note, Lisa's tennis team is especially good, making it to districts and being 4 times Blue Mountain League champs. All of this means that Joe was glad when the girls started to drive. And so took some of the burden off of her. And she was primarily the one who taught them how to drive. Kurt attempted to teach Lisa how to drive, for example. And teaching her to drive shift, it only took once, missing a shift from 5th gear to 2nd gear. Yeah, that was enough for Kurt. He handed her off to Joe, and she took it from there. Kurt's shift work also meant that Joe was largely in charge of the house. She ran a tight ship. She was firm, but she was fair. The girls, they had their daily chores, and they better be done. But they followed a mom who led by example. Joe, this waking up early and working that was defined her childhood just the whole way through her life. She'd wake up early, she'd start laundry. With 3 girls, it seemed like she was always doing laundry. She would start laundry, then she'd head out to work at McCoy's, come home from a day of work, and continue the laundry that she started earlier that day. She kept things simple. The girls weren't allowed to wear makeup. When they went out, Joe and Kurt wanted to meet their friends first, and they better stick to their curfews. Come to think of it, though, I don't know what your curfews were growing up, but any curfew had to be better than 4 p.m. But with her running a tight ship, she was also warm and welcoming. She was the type that when Deb and Bob were dating, she made sure there was always a Klondike bar and a Pepsi for Bob whenever he showed. And as he got older, the Klondike bar and the Pepsi turned into a slice of pie and a cup of coffee. After retirement, there was a lot of time spent on the motorcycle. Through their lives, they had ridden all over the East Coast and up into Canada with friends and family. They were at home on the bike. There's I have a motorcycle myself, and um, there's something intimate about a husband and a wife being on a motorcycle together, right? It's just the two of them on the bike and just cruising and close, and there's something intimate, there's something special about that. As life marched on, it reached a point where Joe required more care than Kurt and the family were able to provide for her at home. They all hated it. Joe hated it. Kurt hated it. The girls, they didn't like the fact that she had to be at transitions, but it's where life had them. And Joe, she made the best of it, having a positive impact on all the other residents and the staff at transition, making friends. And when Kurt moved into transitions with her, he was glad that they were back together again, and so was she. And they stayed together until Kurt passed in August of last year, and Joe passing January 26th with her family around her. Talking to Diane and Deb and Lisa, there's much that comes to mind when they think of their mother. Joe was an excellent baker. So much so that the girls wanted to submit her pies into the baking contest at the South Mountain Fair, and Joe refused to let them. She made lemon meringue pies, and she knew how to get the meringue just right. There were also peach pies and apple and blueberry and cherry, and she made a zucchini pie that if she didn't tell you, you wouldn't have known that it wasn't an apple pie. I've been told that the secret to a good pie lies in the crust. They would wait until a pig was being butchered and then pull all of the fresh lard off of the pig for making the crust. But then after that, right, you also know how to work the crust. You know how you have to know how to work the dough, and there's a knack to pinching the crust. And this is a knack that Diane and Lisa lament that they did not get from their mother. However, Deb claims that she did. I am more than willing to put that claim to the test. I'm thinking apple. Just throwing that out there. Beyond baking pies, if the grandkids were headed on a trip, Joe made sure that they had cookies to eat along the way. She was always baking for other family members as well. Lydia particularly has fond memories of baking with her grandmother. And Joe loved the outdoors. She worked in vegetable and flower gardens, the motorcycle rides, walks through the orchards and the woods. She would sit on the front porch and just listen to the birds, particularly the whippoorwill. And with the birds, she kept a bird feeder full. And every single bird that came into the bird feeder, she knew exactly what type of bird it was. She could tell you. She was the one who taught Diane how to hit a ball. And she kept great care of the pets and the other animals that they had. And she loved her family. I feel like saying that somebody loved their family in a moment like this, it can be cliche. But for Joe, it was something that was far beyond cliche. She almost never left church on a Sunday morning without telling me a story about the grandkids or the new great-grandkid that had come along. This love for her family was there from the beginning as she helped care for her brothers or supporting them, like going to Bill and Steve's races or the pies that she would bake for them. She loved family reunions and going to the Green Dragon and the casinos with her sister. It was seen in the care for her daughters. She wanted them to do well in everything that they did. I would argue this is part of the reason why she ran the house the way that she did, running a tight ship and expecting her children to do their chores in the way that they're supposed to do them. She does this because she wants them to grow up to be responsible women. But it was also in the way that She provided, wanting for them to do well in their school activities. And as much as she loved the motorcycle, Lisa remembers that every once in a while, Mom would let her take the place on the back of Dad's bike. As adults, she would offer to clean their houses for them, although sometimes this was a subtle hint that your house wasn't clean enough. She went to the cousins' football games. She spoiled the grandkids. She made them Easter baskets, and each Easter she reveled come Christmas time with gift giving, and each birthday she would take them out to eat and then shopping for a birthday present. And as I said, I don't say these things just because it's a heartfelt place to be able to transition into a time of sharing. I say them because they're true. I say these things because absolutely, Joe just didn't love you, you felt it. With that, I have a few more things that I do want to share about Joe, especially some things about her faith. But before I get into that, I want to take a moment to step aside and turn things over to some of those who knew her best. And so I want to start with family. And so if there's any family, and I know there's quite a few of you here who have a particular memory or a story that you want to share, or maybe something that I got wrong and you want to correct me, I do want to invite you up. I do just want to share. Just remember that we are being live streamed. And so you do not have to come up to the microphone. However, if you do, it ensures that anyone at home watching will be able to catch it. And so, but I do know that Deb was considering something and has something prepared, and so I'd like to invite you up first.
So when we were here last summer, I stood and gave a confession and an apology to my dad, but I'm not going to do that today because Mom and I were good. But I do have a funny story to share about her. Mom had this sense of humor. She wasn't an outright jokester, but she had this sly tease about her. And we used to have a lot of fun together. Back and forth with one another. And one year, she told me, I have a list. Most people would call it a bucket list, but Mom, she called it things I want to do before I die. So I said, okay, Mom, what do you want to do? And she said, well, I want to fly. I want to fly in an airplane. So we were going to Florida. Mom went along. She flew in an airplane. I remember when we got back, she looked at me after we had landed and she said, never again. She did not like to fly. So we crossed that off, or maybe threw it in her bucket, but she was not going to ever do that again. It was some time later, she had another thing on her list, and she said, I want to go to a NASCAR race. And I said, okay. Bob and I visited several tracks, and let's go to Richmond. So we took Mom down to Richmond. And this is where it was funny. So we were at the track, and at that time, her favorite driver was Kurt Busch, the number 97 Rubbermaid Ford. So we were walking around, and pre-race, there's always activities, and you can buy souvenirs, and we were walking around. We came upon this white tent. It was closed up, but there was a sign outside that said, event, 1 p.m., sponsored, Rubbermaid. So we checked the time, and it was almost 1 o'clock, a few people in line. So we decided to wait and go in. We get inside, and Kurt Busch was sitting inside. Mom was one lucky gal because she was going to her first race and she was going to meet her favorite driver. This is where it got funny. So Mom in her teasing way, so what we did was you went up to to the front. He was sitting at a table. They gave you a card, a photograph. You walked across, he signed it, you said you greeted, and on you went. Mom was behind me. I get my card. The guy that was there was probably doubling as security because he was a big guy, and he was passing out the cards. Mom looked at him and said, "No." And I was like, "Mom, what are you doing?" And she went, "I want him to sign my shirt." Now, she didn't have a Kurt Busch shirt on. She had her brother Steve's shirt on. And this man, big man, leaned down and he said, "Lady, only if you keep that shirt on, he'll sign it." Mom's eyes and her face was like this. And because the teasing mom now he got her. So I can remember going through the line and greeting him and looking back. And Mom was leaning over the table with the security guy, and Kurt Busch was signing her T-shirt right there. We had a lot of good outings with Mom. She was always ready to go. It was great that she was able to do all of our activities, but within the last few years, having our own grandchildren, she was now going to activities for her great-grandchildren. She was always ready to go. If you called her up, she was like, "Okay, what are we doing?" And you'd call her up and say, "You want to go to Boscov's?" And we'd go to Boscov's, your favorite greenhouse. If we were in the Biglerville area, we always had to stop at Sando's because she liked to go in. She knew the guys in there, and she would tease and talk with them. But she always looked for the owner of Sando's because that was Gary Kaufman, and he was the owner of the number 48 sprint car. And she would find him and talk racing among the teasing she would do. But the one thing that Mom, these last few years, her mobility, we weren't able to do as much, but the one thing I would always call her and ask her was, "You want to go to Twirly Top?" She would never say no to getting in the car and going for a bowl of vanilla ice cream.
Nobody in their right mind says no to going to Twirly Top. Any other family has something that they would like to share? How about friends? Are there any friends who were present that has something that they would like to share? Okay. Before I get into the devotional that I have, Diane, Deb, and Lisa, I want to say thank you. A couple years ago, I had an opportunity to speak to a group of high school students just about Christianity, and one of the questions they asked me was how can you get up and do a funeral? And what I shared with them is this is an honor. It is an honor when a family trusts you and invites you in to be able to get up and to tell the story of their loved one. However, in the midst of that honor, sometimes there are some who come along who are just an honor above. And through COVID, I think your mom and dad are probably the two people that I spent the most amount of time with. And to be able to tell their stories and to listen to the way that you girls talk about your mom and the memories that you told about your mom, this has been an absolute honor. And so I thank you. I truly do. Let me find my spot. Kurt and Joe, they love Jesus. There was a time where they were known for coming to church on Sunday morning, and then after doing church on Sunday morning, they would go home and watch church on TV. I would describe Jill's faith as one that was quiet but fierce. She was the one who was quietly praying for Kurt, that Jesus would take a hold of his life and not let go. She knew what it was like to have a little. She knew what it was like to have plenty and to be content no matter the circumstances, like the Apostle Paul taught. She was not one to sit and mope about her life. Wherever she was, if there was work to be done, she did it. The Apostle James, he wrote that pure and undefiled religion before God the Father is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. The last few years that Joe spent at Transitions, as I shared, it wasn't where she wanted to be. But even though it wasn't where she wanted to be, she made the best of it, and she made work of it. She had a positive impact on everyone that was there. I was told a story about one resident by the name of Maggie, who was having a particularly bad day. And Joe approached her and just encouraged her with, "God is with you." And with that, Maggie's day turned around. There was another man who was quite disturbed. He was walking the hall, cursing up a storm, and Joe just reached out and touched his hand and said, there, it's going to be okay. And with that, his day changed and the cursing stopped. And there was Valerie, who her parents were no longer with us, and Joe and Kurt adopted her. Joe said one day she was lamenting about not having parents, and Joe said to her, she said, "We'll be your parents." And this led to a relationship where even on the day that Joe passed, Valerie was down the hall, and Diane had stopped to see her. And as Diane was visiting, Valerie asked her, says, "What are you doing here?" And Diane offered something along the lines of, "Well, I'm here because I'm your friend." To which the staff person who was with her said, "See, just a couple minutes ago you were crying because you don't have any friends. And you do have friends, Valerie." That moment happened because of the difference that Joe was making in the lives of those at Transitions. As I saw it, as her body and her memory faded, her heart never did. I'm a believer that when we stand in front of our Creator, He's going to ask us two questions. The first question that He's going to ask us is, do you know Jesus? Jesus said, He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me." If we are desiring a relationship with our Creator, if we want to have a relationship with God, the only way to have that relationship is through faith in the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That was God's heart in all of it. All of it. The entirety of the Bible, the story is God wants a relationship with us. That is the heart of the Bible. That is the heart of the life of Jesus. If we answer yes, then I believe He's going to follow up with the second question. The second question is, or more of it's a challenge, prove it. James, right, said that true religion is to care for widows and orphans. Jesus taught that come Judgment Day, we're going to be split into sheep and goats, and the sheep get into heaven, and the goats, they're cast into the fire where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. And the difference between the two is the sheep are the ones who fed the hungry and gave drink to the thirsty and clothed the naked, and that's the difference. And so I do believe that, right? And so what this means is that this relationship with the Creator, this isn't a relationship, this isn't a faith where we just get to, say that we love Jesus and then go home and sit on our rocking chairs or go home and just enjoy Netflix for the rest of our lives. It's a faith that is supposed to make better the people that are around us, the world that is around us. This is a faith that it's supposed to actually love people, especially those who we think may not deserve it. Just want to invite you to a conversation. If you don't know what it means to have a relationship with your Creator, have a relationship with the Father, God, whatever name you use for Him, love to have a conversation with you about how to make that happen. And if you do have that relationship and you're curious about what it's like for your faith to make a real tangible difference in the lives of the people around you, I'd love to have that conversation as well. So, let us pray. Lord, we have one more song to sing here. And as we get ready for this, I thank you. I thank you for the love of Joe and Kurt and just the way that they just cared for people and welcomed individuals into their homes and the way that they loved people here at church and just those stories and those memories. And I think for me, the biggest telltale sign of who they are is the respect and the love that their daughters have for them, and the respect and the love that their grandkids have for them. I thank you that we have these stories, that we have these memories, Lord. And as we get ready to close with a song, I just pray that we would speak up and sing loud, and that you would enjoy what it is that we have to offer. I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Roy. As Roy is coming up and getting plugged in, do want to invite all of you who are here to please rise and join us.